This time on Watchers of Tomorrow, Kirk regrets his experience at the Christmas party.
Hello everybody, welcome to Watchers of Tomorrow. My name is Gep, and I am joined as always by my friend Dr. Izix.
Hi!
And this week we have original Star Trek series episode, Dagger of the Mind.
Yes, it's daggers that are in your mind. Wait, that's not what's going on at all, actually.
Apparently it's a reference to Macbeth.
That you see this dagger, before me, that sort of thing, or...
Yeah, if you want to find an awkward time, look up the interviews that they did for the special edition sci-fi series of Star Trek, and Kirk reads Shakespeare very awkwardly in an intro interview.
And sort of his, I'm Slim Shady, the real Slim Shady.
Yes, sort of just like that. Is this a dagger that I see before me? Yeah. It's horrible.
You got this tick Kirk that's kind of famous and exaggerated, but you're exaggerating even more. You don't need to.
Yeah. Interestingly, interviews with him later, he does it, the way people make fun of him for doing it. When you watch him in, the show now, it's really not noticeable.
No, not really. Yeah, sometimes there are some dramatic pauses, but it's kind of, this is also kind of very 60s sort of, man's man sort of acting. It's I need to have emphasis occasionally to think about what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm also very impressed we got to episode 9 before we ever made fun of Shatner's voice.
I know, right? It's weird.
This was just weird to me, because I always try to dig up as many cast and crew interviews as I possibly can find before we record one of these. No one had anything to say about this episode. Usually they can come up with something stupid, like for the Miri episode, they were all talking about Peter Pan and how great it would be to be a child forever, which I don't, if you listen to that episode, I don't think that was really the theme.
Nope.
This one, they didn't say anything. They went on and on about other episodes and weird stories from episodes that weren't this one, and Kirk's thing about it being a Shakespeare reference in the title, and then just talked about other Shakespeare references that they had in other shows.
Well, this one's just kind of there, I guess. So how's the weather out there?
Yeah, the only person who had anything to say about it, which I'll get into more at the end, was Grace Lee Whitney, who's not even in this episode. So, let's just jump in here. Dagger in the Mind is written by Simon Welsberg, but under the pen name of S. Bar David, which is what appears in the credits. Just a TV writer from the time. I don't think there was anything notable that you would necessarily remember him writing.
He worked on Law and Order.
Yeah, which I don't know. Those have all run together for me.
Well, he's technically worked on 2 different Law and Order series. The original Law and Order, where he did an episode called Double Down, and then Law & Order UK, where he basically rewrote the episode for that one.
Oh, okay. It's just interesting how many of the writers from this show are still working on stuff into the 2000s.
Yeah, this fellow is deceased, but he was going until fairly late in. So
we are guest starring James Gregory as Dr. Adams.
Mm-hmm.
Morgan Woodward as Dr. Simon Van Gelder.
Yeah, not to be confused with the country of Gelder from The Princess Bride, but,
No, that's why there's a van.
Yes.
Van Gelder.
Yeah, this is the van where, not the title van, as opposed to you get in this van and you go hang out by the river.
Or that it's filled with candy.
Yes.
And finally, the final main cast person, there's a bunch of extras. I can't list all of the names, it would take forever. Yes. Marina Hill as Lieutenant Helen Noel.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know why that character exists, but okay.
Yeah, to cause a turnabout, I guess. But I guess we'll get into that in the
suppose.
the episode itself.
She's arguably one of the better female characters we get.
She has a certain tenacity to her, and she's well educated. It's yeah, I'm like a legit doctor.
Well, I guess let's jump in here. We fade in to a large tube full of something marked as infrasensory drugs.
Yes.
I looked this up and it is not a thing. The only references to infrasensory that I found online were this episode and a weird song called Infrasensory by a band I'd never heard of.
So obviously these are the drugs that the band was using when they wrote that song.
It does sound like it if you listen to the song. This box is marked for the care of Dr. Tristan Adams at the Tantalus Penal Colony.
It seems important. Some sort of penal colony. It's like a prison, an open-air prison of sorts, right?
Apparently. It's also going to be a big test of our maturity this episode. Because this comes up a lot.
Yes.
The big drug tube is loaded onto the transporter, which is already filled with a bunch of other supplies, but the transporter is not beaming down.
Oh no, there must be something wrong.
Kirk enters and tells the crewmen working the transporter that they forgot about the force field on the planet, and then he calls them and just asks them to turn it off because the crew are still idiots.
Yep.
After the cargo is beamed down, they beam up a bunch of research material bound for the Central Bureau of Penology in Stockholm.
Yeah, it comes in a giant, box, like a really, really large box, not like just like, this is a box you can fit on a desk. No, this is like a box that can fit the desk inside of it.
Possibly even a man-sized box.
Oh no.
As when most of the crew leave, one of them turns his back on the box, and a man comes out of the box.
Dun, dun, dun. No one could expect this.
I know. Who would have thought that this man-sized box that they just leave on the transporter had a person in it from this prison colony?
You'd think they'd at least check it out first, make sure, there wasn't anyone hiding in it.
Maybe. Also, how does the transporters obviously give them no information about what is beaming. It's like, by the way, this box full of research material has an awful lot of organic person-shaped things in it.
Might want to look into that, guys.
The crewman working there is completely oblivious to this crazy dude sneaking up behind him, who then knocks him out.
Wham bam bamida.
It's really kind of awkward how unaware of his surroundings this crewman is.
Well, maybe in the in the world there, it's a very noisy room with all the whoosh and the beep boop beep beep boop stuff going on, and he's right in front of the control panel there, and it might be even louder there. So he just doesn't pay attention to the footsteps of the guy sneaking up behind him, and just completely engrossed in his work there.
That's true. It is probably a very loud ship.
Which probably it begs the questions like, how does anyone get any sleep? But then again, you think about it, and maybe they don't. Maybe that's why they just keep screwing up.
Yeah, that's why they're all idiots. No one's sleeping. We've solved it.
Hooray!
Captain's log. We dropped off stuff at the prison and left.
Hooray! Mission complete.
On the bridge, Kirk is telling McCoy that he would have liked to have met this Dr. Adams to whom they sent the drugs, and asks if McCoy has ever been to a penal colony following Dr. Adams' designs. McCoy comments that a cage is just a cage, but Kirk gets kind of offended and goes, no, these are much more like resort colonies. They're amazing.
Yeah, they're minimal security, sort of, club match, it's a country club. Seriously.
Just then, the colony calls the Enterprise to tell them that they can't find a violent prisoner.
Uh-oh, this seems like a bad thing.
We cut to Crazy Box Guy, who is running around disguising himself as the crewman he just knocked out.
He'll be, that crewman will be quite awkward, a little freaked out when he wakes up and he's naked in the transporter room. Someone might wander in and is like, dude, what are you doing in here? Why are you naked? And he's like, I don't know. I just passed out one point. Huh. Well, can I borrow your shirt? And the other guy's like, no.
Kirk orders a general alert for intruders, and one crewman sees the guy and yells, hey, you're an engineer, and then calls the bridge and goes, hey, I saw an engineer. I don't know why that was suspicious.
Maybe he doesn't like engineers.
Yeah, I think so. Spock sends people to apprehend Crazy Box Man, but he knocks them out and steals a phaser. Kirk calls Dr. Adams to report that they have the Box Man, and Adams reiterates how dangerous he is, and then a guard enters to guard the bridge and stands with his back to the only way in and out of the bridge.
So speaking of competence...
Yes. Spock says how curious it is that Earth people have glorified organized violence for hundreds of years, but condemn those who employ it privately.
I think the one character, I forget the actor's name, Ed O'Neill, his character in Wayne's World basically talked about this very thing in one of his random sort of asides. You kill a man in war and they call you a hero. Kill a man in a fit of passion. Well,
now, yeah, it's an interesting point. It's never revisited. And
Yep.
Is this really the best time to be waxing poetic about the nature of human existence, Spock?
No, not really, but Spock has to be Spug some point, so.
Yes. Boxman runs in, knocks out the guard who was useless,
Yep.
demands the captain, and says that his name is Van Gelder. This seems to cause him pain every time he mentions his own name.
Mm-hmm.
And he requests asylum. Kirk says
Yes.
he won't negotiate at gunpoint and starts to circle around to let Spock get behind him. Kirk then kicks the phaser away and Spock nerve pinches the guy.
Hooray! Everything's solved. We can drop this guy off and we can never think about this ever again. Mission accomplished.
Hooray, yep, heading back to the colony. In sickbay, McCoy says that Van Gelder is not schizophrenic or has any kind of brain damage that he can find or really anything wrong with him at all. McCoy can never find anything wrong with anyone.
McCoy, are you just useless or what?
Like, I understand they want to do this like, we don't know what's wrong with him. But this is like the fourth time McCoy has not been able to find anything wrong with someone.
So it does kind of make you question his credentials here. It's like, yeah, at some point you're going to need to be able to identify someone as being sick and maybe some idea of as to why.
Yeah.
I guess there was the previous episode where he's like, well, I'm just going to research a disease and bring out a cure, But other than that, that's sort of the exception as opposed to the general rule so far.
Yeah. Every now and then he knows exactly what's wrong with someone down to the most minute cellular detail, and the rest of the time he has no clue. Those are his two modes of doctoring.
So, there's the phrase, the ship goes as fast as plot requires. Yeah, McCoy is as competent at being a doctor as plot requires.
Van Gelder starts to ramble a bit.
Mm-hmm. He does this a lot.
Yeah, he does this a lot. Kirk says that Van Gelder is not their problem, and he starts yelling about how, you're going to make me somebody else's problem. He says his name again and that he was the director of the colony that they just left. Both of which cause him pain.
This seems like a name you should probably be familiar with because, the director seems like someone who's like in charge.
Yeah. Like, they didn't tell you about who's running this place?
It's like, oh yeah, just Dr. Adams. He runs everything, even though he's not in charge. So the guy is, which we never mentioned.
He says that he used to know things, but they erased it, and then he freaks out about going back to the prison until McCoy sedates him.
Yeah, McCoy, just fill him up with drugs constantly.
They do that a lot, actually.
Yeah.
On the bridge, Spock has pulled up a reference tape they have for Dr. Van Gelder, who was assigned to Tantalus Colony as Dr. Adams' assistant.
Oh, so he's a director of the colony, but only an assistant of Dr. Adams.
Kirk calls Dr. Adams. I kind of like this because they keep having like, oh my god, something's wrong. Have we discovered something? And then they call Dr. Adams and he goes, oh yeah, by the way, Van Gelder was my assistant and he hurt himself in a machine that made him crazy. How's that going?
Yep. It's like Dr. Adams is kind of anticipating their next move.
Yeah.
Which either is just a plot convenience or sort of being a demonstration that this guy's like really on top of his game. It's like, they've caught this guy. They've probably gotten some information out of him. I should probably head this off at the pass sort of thing.
Yeah, it's actually not bad.
Yeah.
Like, other than that, he's pretty inept at everything, but we'll get to that.
It's like I anticipate things, but I'm bad at other things. So,
McCoy says that the guy doing experiments on himself and making him crazy really doesn't sound right. But Kirk goes, well, Dr. Adams is a famous dude who I love.
Which, yeah, we keep running into those kind of people here. So
Yeah, we do. He keeps going on about how amazing Adams is while he argues with McCoy. And Spock goes, hey, do you maybe want to ask if they want the guy back?
Okay, let's ask.
Adams asks if there are any better facilities to take Van Gelder to. I guess, again, to be like, oh, we don't really want him here. But McCoy says that there aren't, and he knows, and that something suspicious is going on. Kirk keeps trying to ignore that, but McCoy says that he has entered a doubt in his official logs and that makes the captain obligated to investigate what's going on.
So McCoy's calling the shots now. I
Yes.
see.
The only person on the ship capable of giving orders to the captain.
And only under very specific circumstances.
Adams says that of course they can come down to the facility, but, if the captain could come down by himself with minimal staff, that'd be great.
This seems a little suspicious to me.
It also sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
This happened 2 episodes ago.
Come down, but don't bring anyone, please.
Kirk orders McCoy to get him someone who has psychiatric and penology experience. McCoy reports that Van Gelder is too agitated to beam down, but he has sent a Dr. Noel to meet Kirk in the transporter room and accompany him down to the planet.
Sounds swell here. Let's go and take care of things, and everything should be sorted out. We'll check out the penal colony, and mission will be accomplished in about 10 seconds, right?
Yep, it'll take no time at all, right?
Yep.
In the transporter room, Kirk is shocked to see a woman. Oh my god.
Oh no, this is shocking for reasons, I guess.
She introduces herself as Dr. Helen Noel and says they met at the science lab Christmas party, and he seems very upset.
Yes.
This is Dr. Noel, who he met at the Christmas party.
Not too subtle, is it?
No. Kirk's very upset by the fact that he has met this woman before. Apparently.
And has never seen her since the Christmas party, apparently.
Yes, and also, how does he not know this person's name? Like, fine, you're on a ship with like 500 people. Maybe you don't instantly recognize everyone from any department. But this is someone that you met who's been on the ship for at least a year. Like, how does Kirk not know who his crew is?
There's also an instance where there was some sort of awkward moment between them at the Christmas party. You'd think he would have maybe, I don't know, had some curiosity to look her up afterwards.
It's also a pretty small ship.
Yes.
How have they been avoiding each other the entire time?
Maybe Kirk just doesn't go to the science decks?
Maybe.
I'm not going to go down there to hang out with you nerds.
Kirk and Noel beam down to the planet. She insists on being called Helen, but he's still calling her Noel. And they get into a weirdly fast elevator.
Whee!
Yeah, it makes them grab each other awkwardly.
Oh no, we're going to die.
When like a teenager is scared at a movie and they do that like, oh my god, I wanted to hug you thing in movies. That doesn't really happen.
Yeah. I think the last time I was scared at a movie theater, I was more like, I'm going to grip the armrest right here intensely. But I'm not going to like try to move at all because instincts say I might be in danger.
Yeah, if I don't move, it can't see me. Adams is waiting for them by the elevator. Noel again insists on being called Helen, saying there's too many doctors, and everyone will get confused. Are they going to do the doctor routine?
Doctor, captain, doctor.
Kirk reports back to the ship despite Adams saying that he probably won't be able to get through on his communicator with the security field up.
That seems rather important.
Yeah, not really, though. Adams introduces an inmate who he says that they rehabilitated, named Lethe. Lethe, I think. It's one of the mythical rivers in Hades.
Oh, yeah, the Lethe. I didn't remember to note her name down in my notes. So.
Yeah, I heard it, and now I can't remember how to pronounce it. I'm going to call her Lethe. She's a bit weird. She acts a bit odd.
Yes. Like, I am a doctor here now.
Yeah, she was a prisoner, now she's a doctor. Another doctor.
I'm no longer a patient, I am now a therapist.
Kirk asks what she used to be guilty of, why she was sent here. Adams explains that part of their cure is to bury your past so deep you can't even remember it, because, you shouldn't remember bad things that happened to you.
This seems maybe counterproductive to maybe, I don't know, learning how to have better behavior in the future.
Maybe. But Noel agrees and says shifting patterns of memory is basic to psychotherapy. It sounds... I'm not a therapist, so maybe I'm wrong here, but that does not sound right.
It seems a little off to me, too. So, sort of it's like, well, I guess he's... knows what he's talking about, and so I'm going to sort of back him up because it sounds like what people might think happens in the psychotherapist room. situation.
You know what you should do when you've done something bad in your past is bury the memories and shove them really deep down until you just can't remember it anymore.
As opposed to, say, confronting them and coming to understand them and coming to terms with them and learning how to, live with those memories, but also learning how to move on from them. Sort of, recognize them as a part of you and, just understand that they don't need to be a hindrance to your future success.
Why would you do that when you can just shove them down deep inside yourself?
And just forget they exist.
Adams gives a toast because apparently they don't get visitors very often and he wants any excuse to drink.
Yes, it's drinking time.
The toast is all about, may we never find a space so vast or a planet so cold that we cannot fill it with the warmth and love of the human heart or something like that.
But my notes say Adams gives a toast to love or something. Shrug.
I only note it because I think it's the start of where they're trying to introduce us to the theme that they don't explore fully.
Yep, which, it's pretty common here, but
Kirk and Noelle are given a tour of the facility, and Kirk asks about a room that they're just going to pass by. Adams says that it's a failed experiment, and even Noelle goes oh, well, if it's a failed experiment, we don't need to look at that.
Well, that guy up on our ship that is kind of ranting and things like that, wasn't he involved in some sort of failed experiment?
Yeah, but it's a failed experiment. You don't need to look at it. Kirk wants to see it anyway. We cut to the ship, where Van Gelder is yelling something about a neural neutralizer. Then Spock asks what it is. Van Gelder starts screaming. We cut back to the planet, and Adams is telling us all about the neural neutralizer.
Oh, I guess we're going to find out about it anyway. Neat.
Yeah, it's a beam that relaxes people by neutralizing their brainwaves.
Wait a moment, so it turns off their brains?
I guess. They never really explain it beyond neutralizing their brainwaves.
And if you turn off your brainwaves, doesn't that also include your autonomic functions? So effectively kills you?
Possibly, though I don't. So brainwaves are just the electromagnetic signals that we can pick up outside of the head that are generated by electrical signals happening in your brain. So is it just keeping those from leaving your head? Is it just turning off the electromagnetic radiation, in which case the electronic signals would still be going? I have no idea what they mean by brainwaves.
I think it's trying to imply that it's doing more than sort of bottling up inside your head, but sort of suppressing the electric impulses themselves via this method. Though the exact mechanism of that would be a little tricky to really pull off like this.
Yeah. He explains that despite it not working, he keeps using it just to see if it might do eventually.
Well, it's a failed experiment, but we keep using it anyway.
Noelle, despite being uninterested in this failed experiment 3 minutes ago, is well, that sounds like a great idea.
Well, I'm starting to think that you maybe are really kind of caught up in a fanboy moment here. You're just Adams, I'm just going to go thumbs up where you like.
The weird thing is that they switched. I mean, we don't know if she switched, but Kirk was all fanboying over Adam.
Yes.
And then he comes down and is I'm mildly suspicious now. And Noelle all of a sudden is just yeah, but this guy can do no wrong. We don't know what her opinion was of the guy before, but it's weird that she is now telling Kirk how great Adams is when he couldn't shut up about it on the ship.
Yeah. I think it would make much more sense if these roles in the situation were exactly reversed. Because then, you'd have character consistency, and the new character is sort of the one who's, probing and things like that. And Kirk can be sort of, dismissive at first. It's you're the new person. Obviously, you don't know what you're talking about, despite the credentials. And, we'll just sort of roll with it until, everything goes crazy later.
Yeah, I have a fan theory about this we might get to if we have time at the end. Kirk asks how the machine works, and the man who's working the controls tells him how to turn it on and off. I don't think that's what he was asking.
That's really informative, guy. Thank you for telling me that there's an on and off switch.
It's how does an electric light bulb work? Well, there's a switch over there.
And then you flip the switch, and it turns on the light bulb.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to know.
How does a car work? Well, you put the key in the ignition here, you turn it, and then the car's on.
Yep.
And then you turn the wheel.
Okay. Adams says that Kirk is like the skeptic who demanded to be told all the secrets of the world while standing on one foot. I don't know how What?
He's asking for basic technical specs on an obvious sci-fi device here that you're just kind of ignoring his probes at all. You're just oh, yes, we can't go into any of the details because that would be telling. or difficult or, make is an unreasonable request. What?
Noel just goes, no, I'm sure Adams hasn't created a chamber of horrors, hint, hint. Adam explains that the machine is what destroyed Van Gelder's brain, because it's totally not a chamber of horrors.
It's a failed experiment that we didn't want you to look at, but it's also really useful in certain circumstances, but it's temporary, and it also permanently damages this guy's head.
Yeah, makes total sense, checks out fine. They all leave, and the man who was working the machine tells the prisoner that he should forget everything that he just heard, and he turns the machine up, and the guy sitting in the chair is like, and he tells him that trying to remember things is going to cause him a lot of pain.
I think this might be an instance where we should go do the "Ooh, you are under my influence. Look into my eyes."
Yeah, sounds a bit like it. Back on the ship, Spock is trying to get through to Kirk, but he is just talking to him, but he doesn't want to talk when Adams is there and can hear stuff, because he's very suspicious of Dr. Adams. But Adams leaves, which makes that a little immaterial.
Just like, yeah, he's out of here. Don't worry about it.
Yep. Spock then tells Kirk that Van Gelder thinks Kirk is in danger. But Noel goes, no, that is foolish. Van Gelder is just suffering from side effects of the machine we just saw. It's totally not dangerous.
Well, I guess unless we were to be, put in that machine ourselves, everything should be fine, right?
Yeah. Kirk says that he's just going to spend the night to check things out. Van Gelder freaks out and warns them that Adams will destroy. And when he's asked what or how, he says right death. And then the music plays like you just heard a really important thing.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, now I get it. He's saying no, Adams is dangerous. What in the world is right death? And why did it act like we should know what that means?
I guess it's effectively like dying. It's going to feel like dying. It's rightly going to make you feel like dying. I don't know.
And I didn't mishear this. I looked this up in a transcript. So, yeah, right death. Captain's log, or, Spock's log, rather.
It's Spock's turn.
Yeah, this is the second Spock's log we got. I like them better.
Yay.
Spock is going to use a mind meld.
What's this mind meld thing about?
We don't know, and we don't find out.
Cool.
McCoy is trying to convince him to use the mind meld, but he's like, no, it's a private thing that my people do that I don't even know how McCoy found out about. When McCoy says that it could save Kirk's life, Spock agrees, and so does Van Gelder, who I guess it's iffy
about it?
Whether he can give consent to this thing or not in his current mental state, but okay.
True.
Spock clarifies that it is not hypnosis, so we know it's not hypnosis.
It's not this thing that you're projecting into a general area of effect, like maybe something on the planet down below. Not at all.
Not at all. Spock then touches Van Gelder's head a lot. They go back to the planet, where Kirk visits Noel at night in her quarters and asks about the inmates. She says they all look fine, but Kirk says that all the inmates look weirdly blank.
It's like living in suburbia.
Yeah. Noel gets all upset that he's questioning the great Dr. Adams' methods.
Fanboying again? Okay.
Kirk says that he wants to go take a look at the neural neutralizer. We're back on the ship again. Spock has mind melded with Van Gelder, and they're kind of speaking as one person, and it's helping him speak more clearly.
My thoughts to your thoughts.
No, they don't do that yet. Don't confuse. Don't let people think that this is cool yet. All he does is give him a scalp massage.
It's very much sort of like, I'm just going to put my hands on your head in various ways and say things like, mentioning euphoria, the body floats, open your mind, move together, our minds sharing the same thoughts, but not like the real cool lines we have later in mind melds.
Yeah, they haven't made it neat yet. It's just it's a really good scalp massage that helps your brain.
And I was tempted to put in my notes, it's like I can touch you.
Van Gelder says that Adams can make people's minds blank and open so that he can put his own thoughts into them. Then goes on and on about loneliness for a bit. Kirk has gotten to the neural neutralizer and says he has no intention of damaging his brain.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's, I guess, you'd hope so, but yeah. But then he still sits down in the chair and says to turn the thing on. They turn it on for a second. Kirk blanks out. And then when they turn it back off, he's like, okay, I'm ready for you to turn the machine on now.
Doesn't remember what it just happened.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is a dangerous thing. He's completely out of it. He is unconscious during the moments and does not retain any memory of it whatsoever.
Noelle is like being weird in this scene.
Oh, she's being very weird.
It's like, but I just turned it on. She's really happy and excited. Like, but I just turned it on. I just did that. Kirk says that they should try a harmless suggestion. She turns it on and says that he is hungry, and then turns it off, and he goes, I really want some food. And he's like, I did that. Look what I did.
Then Noelle turns evil.
Yeah. Kirk then says, try it one more time, but give me an unusual suggestion.
Something that they'd both realize.
Noelle turns it on and says, hey, we met at the Christmas party, and you, like, danced, and you talked about the stars, and nothing else really happened. But what if, and then they do the woo and show us, like, an imaginary scene.
Yes.
Where they're acting it out, where he carries her into his quarters, says that the crew has been sworn to secrecy about their love affair, and just makes out with her.
She's implanting a false memory into Kirk's head.
Yeah.
Causing him to come to this, a different perspective on their relationship. It's like she's kind of abusing the power she has.
Maybe a little, yeah. Also, isn't it wonderful that we get to see it acted out?
Yep.
Isn't it great for us?
I guess it's to demonstrate how real it is to Kirk.
Adams then enters and holds Noelle hostage. He takes over the machine and starts telling Kirk that he is madly in love with Dr. Noelle and he must have her or there is so much pain. I don't understand why. There seems to be absolutely no point in him doing this.
Yeah, it's sort of like, oh, I guess I got you where I need you to be, so I'm going to become suddenly affably evil. I was like, oh, I'm going to twirl my mustache a little bit.
Yeah. Then he goes, oh, but now she's gone. And Kirk goes, oh no, she's gone now. I'm sad. He makes Kirk drop his phaser and then tells him to drop his communicator. But instead of dropping his communicator, he uses his power of captaining to call the Enterprise, which I guess doesn't go through because he goes Kirk to Enterprise and it goes deet like it connected, and then he just yells like which you'd think would make the crew suspicious.
Yep, but nobody is.
Well, the captain's just yelling again.
Now I think it's important to note that they did point out that Kirk would be calling in like every 4 hours, so if there's radio silence they should get upset, but just a random scream that is probably being blocked by the penal colony's interference screens, yeah, that's probably not going to do anything.
Maybe this is his 4-hour check-in.
Well, we did get a message from the captain a couple minutes ago, so it's right on time for the check-in. Oh, what did he say? He said, might be suspicious, but it's nothing too concrete. We should wait.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's fine. Back in Kirk's room, Kirk is lying in the bed talking about how much he loves Noelle, but she keeps saying, no, Adams put that in your head, don't you remember? And that makes him snap out of it, I guess. He goes over to an air vent and goes, hey, you could crawl through this air vent and electrocute yourself on the force field.
That seems like a bad plan.
Yeah. He just is like, hey, do you have any experience with high voltage force field emitters? And she goes, no. He's like, okay, if you touch it wrong, you'll die. Good luck.
Just sort of solve all our problems for us, please. I'm going to be kind of in a weird state of mind here. And yeah, bye.
As soon as she leaves, Adam takes Kirk back to the chair.
Yeah, in fact, Kirk kind of seems like happy. He's like, well, you're here to take me off to torture me. How cool. Let's go.
Yeah. Adams tells Kirk that he believes him and trusts him and loves him and is just, how great Adams is, basically.
Be my slave, please. It'll make you happy.
Lethe enters and tells Adams that the woman doctor is gone.
Oh, no.
Not the woman doctor.
So that person that we have a name, who we keep on hearing her name over and over again through the entire episode, isn't being recognized at all by anyone suddenly. Weird.
Adams demands that Kirk tell him where she is, but he resists and just lies on the floor in pain.
Because, Kirk powers.
Yep. Magic Captain Kirk power. Away.
He's the main character, so he obviously has, well-formed stats. He's got a wisdom of, 15 or something like that, or something.
He's that end boss character that you really didn't intend your party to fight, and then they do, Yeah.
I'm gonna punch Cthulhu. What?
Noelle finds a big off switch, but she can't make it move, I guess, because she's weak and womanly.
I'm going to pretend it's, that's not the case at all, because, well, Star Trek needs to stop doing that trope so much. I'm going to say that it's just poorly designed and just mechanically stuck and or locked due to a hidden mechanism, because this is a penal colony. You don't want people just wandering in and turning off the important dailies.
That's true. You don't want prisoners to be able to turn the force field off whenever they want.
That would kind of defeat the purpose of the whole system here.
Yeah.
Like, yes, we just wandered into this air duct here. We're in the utility room. We opened up this cage with some important electronics in it that didn't have a lock on it. So we're gonna just flip the switch and shut off force fields, and everything's great. And we can now all beam out of here with our ship waiting in orbit. And why is this designed like this?
It's a well-formed escape plan. Back on the ship, Spock is trying to beam down, but he can't get through the force field.
Yeah. Spock, maybe you need to brush up on the manual for penal colonies as well.
Yeah. On the planet, we see guards enter the power room, but Noelle hides long enough to turn off the main power, which turns off the little inhibitor thing that Kirk is in.
Mm-hmm.
She's grabbed, but now that the power's off, Kirk can karate chop Adams and his helper and leave the neural neutralizer room.
Hooray! You've saved the day, Helen.
The guard in the power room sees Noelle is lying on the floor where he kind of threw her, and moves to grab her, but she is faking and she kicks him into the power relay, electrocuting him and turning off the force field.
At the same time.
Spock finds that the force field is down and beams down into the power room. He then immediately turns the power switch back on for some reason.
By the way, Noelle, who was just there, has just crawled back into the ductwork again, missing Spock entirely.
Yeah, by seconds.
Yes.
It's like an old vaudeville comedy routine.
A comedy of errors, except there's the people dying.
Yeah, that happened. I think that is just the subtitle of this whole series. Turning the power back on reactivates the neural inhibitor, and Adams is still inside, but there is no one there to turn it off.
So this seems like a bad situation for him.
Noelle and Kirk return to their room, where Kirk just starts making out with her. Spock walks in and just gives them a Spock look.
Well, I guess I did get my opportunity to be smug in this episode. All right, at this point, guess I shouldn't have gotten active on that so early.
But then they immediately remember Adams and go, "Oh damn, Adams, let's go find him."
Should probably deal with him or something, I guess.
But they find that he has died in the neural neutralizer because his mind was emptied out with no one to watch the machine.
And give him suggestions to fill it up again.
Yes, they say his mind was emptied with not even a tormentor for company.
I guess that works.
On the ship, the crew reports that Van Gelder has destroyed the neutralizer, so it's gone now.
Good. Let's never build something like this again. It seems like a tortured device that should be outlawed by the Federation Charter or something like that.
Yeah. McCoy says it is hard to believe that a man can die of loneliness. McCoy is the worst doctor. Kirk says it's not hard to believe once you've sat in that room.
So I guess Kirk now knows what loneliness really feels like.
Yeah, I guess. That's the end. The end on, they just, then he smiles. He goes, okay, let's leave. Warp factor, whatever.
Let's go. Let's get out of here. This place sucks.
They seem to really, really want this to be about loneliness. They keep mentioning it. They talk about it all the time. They do nothing.
There's not really any sort of obvious isolation going on. That's sort of this, what we're telling you, it's feeling like you're lonely, but you're not really experiencing it. We see how you react to the suggestions of pain. We see how you react to the, just forget things. Okay, I forgot things. But you don't really sort of, get a good demonstration of that loneliness, other than maybe this sort of weird implied, well, I'm now separated from Helen, who I've been hypnotized into loving forever. And that is uncomfortable, I guess.
Yeah, except they don't really go into this. One, the first thing I would do is use the frickin' neuralizer to undo all the suggestions.
Yes.
Just put you in the thing and go, hey, everything you heard in the chair is wrong.
Yeah, in fact, everything is awesome.
Everything is awesome.
I sort of interpreted the Spock's mind melding with Van Gelder as sort of the go-to fix. I'm guessing then Kirk then got some of afterwards, and maybe the other prisoners on the planet.
Yeah, so they never really say whether he's fixed or not.
Nope.
If he's not, it seems pretty obvious that Noelle is into him. So I don't really understand the issue.
Like, well, it does kind of bring up the problem that Kirk has this memory that's now implanted into his head that is not real, that basically has him remembering a situation that he did not consent to. And so I guess maybe the first instance of Kirk, who usually seems to be the one who's kind of instigating the oh dear stuff here, is kind of the one being abused.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, that her putting in like a memory of them sleeping together is not great. It's certainly nothing near the level of the stuff he's done in the other episodes, but it's not great.
And it's, in effect, is leading him to potentially pursue a relationship that he, in his right state of mind, would not have consented to. Which, that's kind of not cool, lady. Also,
yeah,
Adams.
It's like really high-tech gaslighting.
I bet, yeah. Oh, you were totally into me.
Yeah.
Believe me. I'm going to use a theme thing on your head now.
Now, they kept talking in like things I was reading about this, about the whole loneliness of command idea, which I feel like is a theme this show really, really wants to have throughout all of the episodes. They keep talking about how lonely Kirk is being in command and how command is all lonely and you have to be alone. Did we mention it's lonely? And they never really do anything with it. He's got friends. Yeah. He every now and then talks about how he can't sleep with somebody else on the ship, which, oh my God, so sad for you. But also there's nothing to prevent him from pursuing a relationship outside of the people who are his immediate subordinates.
Yeah. Like, okay, so let's say everyone on the ship is off limits. Well, you do visit planets occasionally. You do, I guess would have passengers at some point. Maybe just, I don't know, find someone that way. It's like, hey, I'm on a spaceship. There is a little bit room, so maybe I could, bring you along.
Even if he couldn't, he is constantly being with women and stuff when he's on planets.
Yep.
Fine, maybe he doesn't have a fulfilling long-term relationship, but I certainly wouldn't classify him as particularly a lonely person.
Nope.
And they keep also bringing up this thing that he can't have a real relationship because he's already in love with the Enterprise. Which also, fine. Like, if you're that dedicated to your job and you consider it that important and it takes up that big a chunk of your life, like, aren't you finding that fulfilling?
Yeah, that would make sense. It's like, okay, you have this obsession. You got this thing that fills up every waking moment of your day. And it's, sure, it means you don't have personal relationships, but if this is what you want to pursue and you are doing it, then what's the problem?
You have people like that who are just really dedicated to something they're doing. Like, I really just want to focus on this part of my life, and the other parts just aren't as important to me because I get so much joy and fulfillment of like doing this one thing.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that.
But they keep constantly implying that there is.
Star Trek. Now, I will maybe point out that if you really want to have an example of Star Trek of sort of the lonely captain trope, the Next Generation's so much better on this. Picard's not constantly trying to, basically get his Mac on. He does occasionally, but, it's sort of, it's like, yeah, he sort of has this, he intentionally puts this distance between himself and his crew, even like in social situations, that sort of makes him seem distant at times, but, he is also clearly trying to, do the best for them at the same time. So it's sort of like, I'm your captain, I would like to be your friend, but I also understand that to be your captain properly, I can't be.
Yeah, and they also do a really great thing, I feel, with Picard and Dr. Crusher.
Mm-hmm.
Because, one, it's shown from the first episode that they knew each other previously.
Yes.
And also, it's arguably a much more equal relationship because the ship's doctor is in charge of all things medical and in certain situations can even unseat the captain.
Yes.
And so he really can't... she's still a subordinate, but it's not as clear-cut as other people, so she's the one that he has the most intimate relationship with.
So there's much less of a power imbalance.
Yeah, so the only person he's really close to are her and arguably a little bit Riker, who are the two people who have the least power imbalance.
So it definitely works a lot better in TNG.
Yeah, but also he doesn't complain about it, and he has relationships with people when he's not on the ship.
Yeah, it's like, the Enterprise means a lot to me, but I also do have interests outside of that.
Yeah, I do other things.
In fact, he has relationships. He has interest in archaeology and cultures and things like that. He's a scholar. He's well read. He's a more complete person than what we've seen of Kirk so far, who's just sort of like, well, I'm the captain and I am lonely? Question mark. So I guess at this point, my position on the Kirk versus Picard is starting to materialize a little more solidly, I think.
From the first episode, I was like, how has there been a debate over this? I don't understand.
Indeed. I guess maybe come down to sort of, your perceptions of the whole situation, as far as, what sort of, how much analysis you put in this, as well as what you value as a person in sort of your ideal captain. But,
do you celebrate a 60s idealized version of toxic masculinity? I've got your guy.
Yeah. If that's your thing, then, well, I guess it's pretty clear you're going to be a Kirk person then. All right.
That's going to get me some comments. Okay.
That's fine. We need more comments anyway.
That's true. YouTube loves controversy.
All right. Hey, let's stoke some more controversy. Let's talk about prisons.
Yes, prisons. They wanted this to be a prison reform episode, I think. Maybe.
Yeah, among other things, yes. It's like, it's okay. It's in the future. It's like, yes, we've figured out ways to make prisons much more humane and more focused on rehabilitation. And, yes, these people can be very dangerous. We are isolating from the rest of society to protect that society. But we are here with a goal of making them better people so that when they get out, they're going to be able to, fit back in society perfectly again. Which, seems like a very laudable goal, right?
The problem for me, it seems like they're saying the way prisons operate, both in the 60s and now, because we haven't really had that much of a shift in prison operation or point in the last 50 years. But they imply, one, prison reform is an incredibly recent thing in this universe. That this one dude is solely responsible for all prison reform that's happening.
Yeah, that's good on him, but it kind of sucks for the rest of everybody.
Also, now he has been thoroughly discredited and shown to be like some sort of mad scientist dude.
Yep.
So are they saying that wanting to reform prisons into a nice thing is wrong? Because if you have the one person who is the avatar of this, and he gets into some kind of freaky mind control stuff, are you saying that that is an inevitable consequence of prison reform?
It seems like a bad lesson to me.
I think it's something that they didn't think through at all, but it does seem to be muddling. Once again, it's muddying. It's muddling the point and muddying the waters. Yeah.
At the very least, they should have had some moment in there where Adams was like, "Yeah, things were getting, working for most prisoners, but the worst of the worst, we weren't able to. I wasn't able to figure it out, and I feel that's a personal failing, and so I started looking around for other options." And I came with the neuralizer, and it seemed to work perfectly. And so, maybe I, took a step too far and, decided to go for a shortcut as opposed to doing the hard work of, actual prison, reform, the degree necessary to eventually reach everybody.
I guess the only thing they ever actually show him using the thing for is glorifying himself.
Yep. Which definitely prevents that from being a message at all.
I kind of got some lobotomy vibes.
A little bit, yeah.
With the way all the prisoners were kind of wandering around being completely docile.
I love my work. Honest. Hi.
And that was something that had fallen out of favor by the 60s, but was still in use in the early to mid 50s.
Mm-hmm. So it's very recent history.
Yeah, and I had some misconceptions about this too, so I'll just go over. Lobotomy is when they destroy a part of your prefrontal cortex. And it basically makes you stop caring about things. It kind of destroys the connection between the emotional center of your brain and the other part of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So you no longer have access to your emotion. And it can make people more docile, especially people who are severely agitated or having severe emotional responses to things. But it has some very weird and unpleasant side effects, even apart from how horrible it is to imagine the fact that you are permanently destroying somebody's connection to their emotions.
Not only horrific in the in the general sense, but it also has side effects that aren't so good too.
Yeah, the one that stuck out to me is it's not uncommon for someone who has gone through this to stop cleaning themselves and to become incredibly interested in their own bowel movements.
Oh my.
Because they don't have emotions about it. They, like, can't be disgusted by things or care that there's societal stigma around certain things that they do.
Well, I'm just going to ultimately not care about anything, so, oh, look at this neat stuff. What's going on here? I have no experience playing with it, so I'm going to do it so now.
Yeah, so it was kind of a thing to make, I believe it was more often used in mental institutions, and it was often used to make patients more docile.
Yes.
And the reason that it fell out of favor is because they developed drugs that made people more docile.
Yes. I don't remember if it was in this episode. I remember at least sometime recently in our viewings, someone was mentioning, that, maybe it's not a good idea to be just pumping drugs into everybody constantly.
Yeah, that was in this one.
Okay.
When they saw the chair, Noelle says, this is great because we can make them docile using this thing instead of filling them with chemicals constantly.
So we go from something that scrambles your brain in the physical sense to chemicals to something that scrambles your brain in the electromagnetic sense.
Yeah, and it's all kind of about prisoner docility. So the weird thing is, the way they present it, I'm not sure if we're supposed to have a problem with it or not.
Yeah.
Because Kirk says, oh, they seem a little bit docile, but Noelle thinks that pumping people full of chemicals is great except for the chemicals.
Just because chemicals.
And that this chair's great because it does the same thing with no chemicals. Kirk is a little upset by it, but in kind of a this makes me uncomfortable way, not a oh my god, this is against the very fundamental fabrics of our society kind of way.
Wait a moment. Maybe Kirk's already been in a chair like this before. He doesn't care anymore.
I mean, he does talk a lot about visiting these prisons. He goes, I've been to penal colonies before. I've visited ones that are run under this guy's ideas. I would like to meet this guy because I think his ideas are so neat.
Maybe there's a massive conspiracy going on that all the prison colonies all across the Federation, I mean, whatever place this is that we haven't quite established yet, maybe all these penal colonies have these torture chambers, these neuralizers, and everyone that goes there is basically hypnotized and just like, oh yeah, this place is great, as all the prisoners are all brain drained and made into perfect puppets. It's sort of this weird plan from this Dr. Adams fellow, and this is not just an aberration, but a massive conspiracy on his part to basically, I don't know, control people. Shrug.
So the other thing that I didn't really like with how they were handling the prison stuff, they never go into what this is a prison for. Is it just a general low security prison? Was it like a high security thing before, since it's on another planet and underground and all these things?
Yeah. It seems like a high security place, because of the underground aspect, but yeah.
And then Kirk mentions something when he's talking about the prison reform, about how they're not cages anymore. They are kind hospitals for sick minds. Are all of these now, are they only mental institutions, or are they equating any criminal behavior with mental illness?
Because that doesn't quite follow. It's fairly simple to sort of claim that, oh yes, anyone who commits a crime is obviously mentally unsound. That's not the case at all. People have motivations. They are completely in charge of their faculties, and just come to the conclusions well, maybe I want to do this thing because I have logical reasons that, given what I value and what I believe is important, that this is the best thing to do. And some of those activities may be criminal in nature. And there's also the aspect of, well, I could do this and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get caught, so might as well. And sometimes they get caught, just weren't expecting it.
That's the thing, is people like to have this idea that other people make weird, irrational decisions. But I'm not entirely sure that a person is capable of making an irrational decision. Because you think through your choices, and you make the decision that you feel is best for the circumstance. So someone who steals something, maybe they are completely desperate for money, maybe they don't realistically see a way to get that much money as quickly. They've entered into a circumstance in which stealing things makes the most sense for the path they want to have in the future, and then it just becomes a matter of calculated risk.
Yeah, and it's like, Joe, McMafia guy over here said he's going to, break my legs unless I get him the money. Well, I guess I got to go steal it because I don't have any other way to get it. So this makes the most sense for me at this time. And Joe McMafia guy over there, has his own people he has to, sort out, or he needs money for some sort of operation, or maybe he's just like, well, I got my sick mother here, and I might be kind of a jerk, and but I have a good racket going on, and I'm going to get all the money I need to make sure she lives not just healthily, but in a life of luxury, to show her my appreciation, and that's why I'm going to run my criminal enterprise here. It all kind of builds upon itself, and it generally sucks that people are ripping each other off, but it all it all makes sense to them internally.
Yeah, and even if you get into the realm of something like mental illness, all someone with a mental illness does is it's changing where their motivations and perceptions are coming from.
Yeah.
So, like, if someone is paranoid and thinks that, the CIA has listening devices in the walls, it makes perfect sense to rip up the walls. That's a completely rational decision coming from that viewpoint.
Of course, they're wrong. They're in the ceiling, but
Yeah. Nobody puts them in the walls.
It's too simple.
So just, I don't know, the equating criminal behavior with mental illness kind of bugged me.
Yeah, me too.
Everything that I've read for, episode descriptions calls this a Institute for the Criminally Insane, which, one, is an incredibly weird, outdated term, but also is never mentioned in the episode.
Well, it's a penal colony of just people that are in prison, I guess. Moving on.
Now, the other thing, this episode seems to have a lot to say about hypnosis. The chair is basically a hypnosis chair.
Indeed. Not one of the fun ones either.
Yeah, it's a magic hypnosis chair, but there was kind of a fear around hypnosis. It started coming into vogue, I think, in the 1800s, with hypnotists doing amazing things. Like they would do stage shows where they show people's pain being blocked. They'd shove a needle through someone's arm. Arguably, that was probably some sort of sleight of hand magic trick, but they'd put on demonstrations like this, and the medical community and high profile rich people would go see this stuff and be like, oh, look at all the amazing things that the human mind can do when hypnotized.
So amazing. Now let's go to our ether parties and have a good time there too.
But an interesting thing in the 50s and 60s is a lot of this mental stuff that was very, very popular in the 1800s started having a large resurgence. So hypnotism was something that was being looked into around this time period. It was being tried out for a lot of stuff. I couldn't find any specific information. I do apologize. I didn't have time to do the detailed research that I would have liked to, but I would not be surprised if it was at least tried for some things like prison reform. I know even now it's tried for things like addiction. Like, people will get hypnotized to try to quit smoking, and it's a very kind of similar thing to what they show in the episode. They will try to hypnotize someone and implant a suggestion that now, seeing cigarettes or craving cigarettes will make you feel ill.
This particular, feel ills thing is something that also comes up in a kind of famous movie/book of sorts called A Clockwork Orange. Remember that?
Yes. I've not read/seen that yet, but yeah, I'm familiar with the broad strokes.
Yeah, so there's a procedure involved there that basically you are given some, a cocktail of drugs, I think it was, and then you're forced to watch these videos of violence and war crimes and all sorts of other unpleasant things. It's supposed to shape your mind in such a way that anytime that you are experiencing these things, you experience pain. Sort of some parallels to what's going on in this particular story. It's sort of a hypnosis sort of structure in that respect, to try to build up an aversion to these sort of activities. Of course, one of the side effects is that it's so he's also listening to one of his favorite pieces of music during the entire procedure. So, whoops. Now he doesn't like that because it gives him pain.
I think the Clockwork Orange thing is kind of there to ask the question, can you reprogram a person like a machine?
Mm-hmm.
Which is the whole Clockwork Orange reference.
Yes.
Can you make a clockwork organic being? Which is the old way of saying computer.
Yes.
So this is kind of getting into a similar thing of can you reprogram people and should you reprogram people? It is, again, completely ruined by the fact that Kirk's magic Captain Kirk powers apparently make him immune to the bloody thing when he wants to be.
I'm just going to sort of ignore this and do things and struggle and manage to pull myself out of the chair because I'm Captain freaking Kirk.
Yeah.
No one else can do this. And even Adams even mentions like Van Gelder was down on his knees and begging your mercy or something like that at this point, or forgiveness or something. He was begging for something.
Yeah, and Captain Kirk's magic Kirkness saves the day, and it kind of gets rid of any kind of discussion you could have about like how does this thing work? Is it right to do? Is it okay to like reform someone if all you're doing is giving them a like physical aversion to violence? It's kind of the same. I'm forgetting what it is, but there have been some things that use like shock collars for similar narrative devices. Like anytime you do violent things, it's going to give you an electrical shock to like train you away from it. It's actually a very, very behaviorist kind of viewpoint on these things, that people need to be trained. So if you have a violent thought, you're going to experience a negative consequence, and that will train you to stop having these thoughts.
Which is a bit cruel, you could say.
It's a bit cruel. It doesn't work particularly well.
Yeah. It's like, well, if you get in a situation where you're not going to experience that pain, you can overcome that training, to basically revert to the pattern of behavior you had before. Where if you were to say instead internalize I should probably not do this, because because my values are now different, then that will be a more effective thing in the long term.
Yeah, and you can internalize these punishments. It does cause problems. It's called trauma.
Yep.
This gets into this kind of just reminds me of this quote that I heard. Someone was asking Skinner, who people were probably familiar with from Skinner boxes. He was a large proponent of behaviorism and this kind of training. They were asking him about like free will, and he basically said, you don't have it. You are a solely trained system of responses.
Yeah, that's something I have to find myself disagreeing with. For I guess a few reasons. There is a component to the human psyche that is built off the learning experience, as well as the biological factors and everything like that. But there is, at the end of the day, still going to be a element of randomness to it, sort of the byproduct of the physical world. There is going to be a portion of you that is going to be always unpredictable. Chalk it up to quantum flux or whatever, but it's sort of, there is always going to be an uncertainty unless you take apart the human brain piece by piece, map it out, and probably kill the patient in the process. You can sort of guide things a certain degree, but you're not going to ever 100% turn someone into an automaton.
Well, there's been some interesting research recently in the idea of randomness as it comes into human experiences because of, I think I talked about this before when I got onto hallucinogens somehow, and I can't remember when that was, but there's the idea of the default node network, which is how your brain just defaults. And there's certain things, and especially when you're younger, but some people are more prone to this than others, that just can randomly change at certain points. And this, we theorize, is one of the things that can make people creative. So your brain's not simply going through exactly the same neural links every single time you do anything. Sometimes it randomly jumps around and creates new connections that it didn't before. And this is what allows you to have creative solutions to problems.
We're going to try a different pathway to get to this part of your brain, and look, it sent us through this section, and now we're doing something slightly different, and we still thinking about it, and we're still getting the signals to where they need to be, but now they're coming in a different format. And so now I got a different idea on how to run this. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, which I don't know. We'd have no clue how the brain works to this kind of degree, and talking about it like we do creates its own issues, but I think it's kind of an okay analogy for now.
It's okay to talk about the stuff that we've been able to sort of figure out, but there is very much, we need to make sure we point out to our audience that we're not experts on this, and we are probably wrong about several things, and feel free to correct us, for one. because we'd like to be more informed. And 2, we also understand that we have limited knowledge about this the thing just in general as in entire society. And to say for sure 100% this is how it works is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like that good old quantum physics quote. Anyone who says they understand quantum physics is lying.
Yep. I could talk about all sorts of crazy stuff involving quantum physics, but that'll be a discussion for another time, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to that eventually.
Probably a lot in Voyager.
Yeah. The hypnosis thing is kind of... It feels dated.
Yeah.
I know it feels dated now. I think it was probably dated then, because it's basically just... It's just like the robot thing with Frankenstein, where they're just taking an old story, dumbing it down a little bit, and then putting a sci-fi paint job on it.
Aye.
This is just the kind of old horror movie of someone can take control of your mind through hypnosis or, foreign magics or whatever racist thing they'd come up with at the time.
Yeah, you are now my puppet. I'm going to send you out to do evil things now.
And this is just that, with some sci-fi makeup on it.
I guess the most uncomfortable / potentially interesting thing that kind of came up in the episode was Dr. Noel, her in particular, her abuse of power over Kirk while he's in the chair, because this is supposed to be normally a character that's on his side, who's still being sort of tempted to sort of like, well, I'm just going to ignore my ethics here for a little bit and use this power for my own benefit. Kind of comes brings up notions of consent and the ideas of, well, if you have this power over someone that you're kind of really into, are you going to be able to resist that temptation if given the opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, we can just basically flat out say that in this kind of situation, which thankfully is not realistic, nothing you can do is consensual.
Yes. It's very important to point out.
There are very specific circumstances where you go in and sign a bunch of papers that say this is exactly what I want you to do to my brain while you're, future hypnotizing me.
Yep.
But, outside of that, you cannot perform consensual anything with this device.
Invasion of your person and personality.
Which, let's just be all of these hypnosis things, we'll give this a pass because it's future hypnosis. This hypnosis, if it exists, there's some debate on these things. It puts you into an incredibly relaxed state where you are open to suggestion, but you really will never do anything that you wouldn't have done anyway.
I'm reminded of an episode of Doctor Who where someone was using some sort of blood control, as I think it was called. Some aliens are coming to visit Earth because they're like, hey, you got some stuff there we want. You're going to give it to us, otherwise you're going to straight up murder a quarter of the entire population because we have full control over them, honest. And it was all sort of a hypnosis scheme where they use this magic sci-fi power to cause millions upon millions, even billions of people to go up to high locations and prepare to jump off to commit suicide. And because this was only a suggestion and they wouldn't actually commit suicide, none of them did. But the people on Earth didn't know that. So it was sort of like, all right, well, I guess we've been hoodwinked.
No, it's the first episode with my favorite doctor.
Yes. Mr. Tennant there, yes.
Yes. So this does get into that, there were a bunch of things, trope fears around hypnosis, can you hypnotize someone to murder someone? Can you hypnotize someone to kill themselves? None of it true, but they had movies and books and stories and whatever about it anyway.
Yes. And, I think we could potentially jump off here to something sort of related to this. Now, going back to that sort of loneliness, that draining sort of sensation, sort of one of the parts of this particular type of hypnosis in this sci-fi device dealy is that it's potentially sort of eliminating thoughts entirely. It's effectively draining out your mind if you're exposed to it too long. Now, I'm tempted to talk about either Red Dwarf or Babylon 5, but I think Babylon 5 might be the better example, if you're prepared for that.
Gee, you're bringing up a Babylon 5 example? I never would have seen that coming.
It's either that or Red Dwarf, so I can go either way here. But Babylon 5, as far as it has in the universe, something that's kind of similar, actually. It's basically they have a cocktail of drugs and other things, I guess it's never shown directly, that can effectively completely erase someone's mind. Like all memories are dumped and sort of resets a lot of the brain structure apparently as well. And this is seen as a more humane, alternative to execution. It's like, this person is like a planetary serial killer madman, and he is going to harm people for as long as he exists. And our options are either, an execution, or we do this other thing. And so they, have this whole, is this morally right? Is this, something we should be doing? And what about the situation? It's like, okay, you've basically memory dumped this person, and they're now very sort of malleable and, suggestible. It's like, you had an accident. Yes, honestly. And you have, been working with this, this holy order of monks here to do this particular type of work. And, you're welcome to continue to do such, but, if not, that's fine. But, we'd like to help you relearn and figure out who you are again, if that's cool. So I was like, oh, sure. Yeah. This seems like it's totally what my entire life is, because that's all I know now. In some of the episodes where it comes up, sort of goes into all this, and it actually happens a couple times in the series. In one of the episodes, though, it kind of comes up with the question of, well, what if the victims of the crimes come back to basically haunt the person who's been mind wiped?
That I think is like the same episode of Black Mirror.
Seen Black Mirror?
People who have will remember that one, where it's basically the same thing. Someone is mentally wiped with a bunch of drugs, and they're the people that they hurt, come back and torture them endlessly.
Kind of sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does kind of bring up the question of, all right, is this, now the person that was the murderer, are they now effectively dead? Does this kind of count as a new person, especially if they have absolutely no memory of it, and anything else that could potentially cause them to remember those things requires an outside bit of interference, say a telepath or something like that.
Yeah, well, you kind of get into this idea with that of, is forgetting your life the same thing as dying?
Yes, that's a good question.
And is it, if you can do this to someone, is it morally more justifiable than just killing them? I mean, morally, I think there's a lot of schools of thought that would say definitely not, largely because if you're trying to do this because the person's like a murderer or something, and you wipe their brain, leaving them alive, you having made this decision leaves you completely morally responsible for any action that they take in the future.
Very true. I guess that's something I didn't really think about. Like, wait a moment. Yeah, that's you're totally right. Because you've now effectively created this person, in an artificial means that, if you are going with the tropes of the setting, you are effectively able to craft it, this new person however you like. And in Babylon 5 specifically, building new personalities comes up a few times because there's all the telepath stuff going on. They're able to sort of deep dive and manipulate your mental structures. So it's like, okay, maybe I'm just going to tinker with a few things, or I'm going to create a whole new personality, and you are now thinking yourself something completely different who maybe acts the same as they did before, but is secretly working for us the whole time. And there's sort of all this sort of responsibility of, okay, you've now effectively made an automaton that just happens to look like a person, effectively.
Yeah, well, that gets into Manchurian Candidate territory. I guess that's some of the other Red Scare sort of paranoia that you get from that, of double agents and triple agents, and how can you know if someone is actually working against you?
Indeed. And I think that's all maybe a little bit beyond the scope of today's episode, because they don't go into any of that to the
Yeah, they don't. The only thing that they say is that it's weird someone can die of loneliness, which no, it's not. Happens all the time. Being completely isolated from people ruins your health and mental health. If you are young and healthy, it does some very, very bad things to your brain. If you are older, it significantly shortens your lifespan.
It's good to have a community of some sort, to sort of interact with, and there's a habit of that humans tend to have where they try to seek those out. Even like the most introverted folks, like, well, I might not be able to deal with like people that are super extroverted, but maybe I can find some other introverts.
Well, people are completely social animals.
Yeah.
And not having social connections is not how we function.
Yes.
The being completely isolated from other people is not good for you.
I often feel this at like 1 a.m. It's like, who's online I could talk to? I just feel like I need to talk to somebody.
Yeah, you instinctively strive for social connection. And there's also a lot of evidence of like there's been a bunch of infant studies where not being touched by people seriously messes you up in some very profound and deeply disturbing ways that they tested with monkeys in an incredibly unethical way.
It's sort of a well, let's make sure we don't do this to real people, please.
Yeah, there's a few stories of people who had this happen to them accidentally most of the time that you can kind of draw conclusions from. Most people who were raised in that kind of way became sociopaths.
Yeah.
They did not develop a conscience in the way that we understand it.
If you are effectively the only person in your world for most of your life, you maybe continue to sort of view the world in that lens. Yeah, you are now interacting with other people, but you don't really see them as such.
It was also kind of an odd thing with like, what does it actually mean to empty your mind of thoughts? Because this just kind of struck us when I was watching it here. Been reading a lot of things and hearing a lot of things recently about meditation, and that seems to be the goal of meditation. So yes. I'm not exactly sure what they're talking about with this machine. I guess if it's completely shutting off your brain in some sort of physical way, then it would definitely kill you. But it seems like it would kill you whether someone was there talking to you or not.
Unless that talking to you is sort of, forcing something to overcome the impulse of the machine, which I guess also keeps your heart beating. I guess.
I think the only other real thing to talk about with this is kind of the fear of madness that kind of goes through this whole episode. It's
a bit of that.
They kind of have this thing of like the fear that someone else can make you go mad, or possibly that a mental institution in general could do this to you.
Well, I think a quote that comes to mind was from I forget the exact name. It's like maybe The Haunting of Hill House or something like that, where it was like they're in a institution, there's ghosts or something like that, and they're like, yeah, this guy decided, well, maybe if you expose someone to something that makes you go crazy, you'll become uncrazy. It doesn't make any damn sense, but that's why a lot of the weird, crazy stuff's going on there. That's sort of part of the fear of that movie. That there's these things you're going to be exposed to that are going to damage you, and that's part of the threat, not just the spooky ghosts.
I don't know. There's that. We had some Lovecraft stuff going on a couple episodes ago, and that dealt a lot with the idea that external things could just, make you insane. There's a philosopher, I again apologize, I didn't have time to completely familiarize myself as much as I should. There's a philosopher called Foucault who wrote a lot about madness and its place in society. And he kind of had a through line from madness kind of replacing leprosy as we gained a better understanding of medicine, but less understanding of how mental illness functions. And that just kind of creating a class of people that we could easily ostracize from society.
The other that is acceptable.
Yes. So you kind of hit that with this, like, if you fear the mentally ill, if you believe them to be an other that are either dangerous or rightly ostracized, then the prospect of becoming one of them would be horrifying.
Oh, you better be afraid, guys.
So with this, you're hitting a lot of way too many of those like common mental illness tropes. They're yelling a lot for no reason. They're going into hysterical laughter, things that are associated with certain kinds of mental illness but are not as common as people think. They're just very, very visible signs that people tend to be afraid of because they're some of the more recognizable symbols of someone who's suffering from a mental illness, but they're kind of bad tropes. They're not used as much anymore.
Sort of in the same basket of things as, split personality. It's like, yes, I'm a completely different person now. I'm a completely different other person. I'm a different person now. And
I don't know when we're getting to that, but like multiple personality has so many problems. Yeah. Also, since we mentioned it, I should say modern thinking on this, it's called dissociative identity disorder, so you can look that up if you're curious about it. But it wasn't really done in this episode, so
we can touch on that later. But it's sort of one of those, another one of those tropes that's not really representative of anything that's actually true. It's sort of just associated with mental health issues in the in total in media.
Well, you hit these things where I think using dissociative identity is actually a good example. You have something that's sort of understood in the medical community. It's maybe not understood well, but they kind of start talking about it. That filters into the general understanding where someone goes like, multiple personalities, that sounds like you're a bunch of different people. I could use that in a TV show. And then that becomes the understanding that everybody has.
Indeed.
To the point where now we have to like completely explain to people, no, this does not mean you have 5 different people living inside your head. It's a completely different thing that you don't see on TV.
It's one of those games of telephone. Also echoes a lot of the issues I have with science writing, especially when it gets into mainstream publications.
Yeah.
It's like, scientists prove this. No, they suggest that it might be true if this is the case, and they happen to run into this, maybe. Stop insisting this is what it is.
I know, I keep getting sent articles from relatives of like, hey, look at this thing we found about living in cities. It's like, oh yeah, you mean this one study that was debunked 2 months later and wasn't done well in the first place? Yeah, great source.
Thanks for wasting my time with nonsense.
The other thing with the episode, I'm not sure how much influence it would have had, but One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was published in 1962 and was fairly popular at the time, which is all about abuses at mental hospitals.
I've unfortunately not read that or seen the movie myself. I've heard a number of things about it, though.
Yeah, I'm also coming from a similar place, but it had kind of an anti-authoritarian vibe going. There was like an abusive nurse, and then one guy who was in there kept getting electroshock treatments that they posit he didn't need, and then he escapes and is like seen as this rebel character. So I feel like you could draw some parallels between that and kind of Kirk being put in this thing and it not affecting him as much, and like being the strong person who can get through this thing and fight the mental health system.
Which does kind of call into question some consistency, because if he's supposed to be sort of this ideal, I'm totally fit and on top of things sort of person, then why did Van Gelder not have as much luck as well?
Well, I guess Van Gelder's just not as mentally strong as Kirk.
I guess, yeah. If it's only supposed to really be effective on people that are, quote, broken, then I guess Van Gelder was partially?
Well, I guess that's not really implied to only be effective on certain people, just maybe Kirk is special. Yeah. Maybe they're kind of implying a stronger force of will idea, because this whole thing going back to the hypnosis is like, you're implanting ideas into people's minds, so arguably with a strong enough willpower, which was this kind of magic thing people used to talk about, or I guess they still talk about it, but if you have the strong enough will, you can fight through these mental suggestions. It gets into this kind of resilience concept that I don't know how much I want to get into right now, because I don't want to rant about it for another half hour.
Yeah.
But it kind of gets into this really troubling idea that if you're negatively affected by this, it's your fault for not being strong enough.
Which is a lot of BS, I'd say.
Yeah. It's not only is it victim blaming in its mentality, it's like arguably not true in most things that it's applied to, and it ignores like a host of other factors that could go into things like that.
I'm suddenly reminded of I think I saw it on Twitter. It's like, I think it was Captain Picard, in fact. Sometimes you can do the all the right things and still lose. And it's like, yeah, you are strong enough, you're good enough. But yeah, sometimes you just kind of, things don't work out for you.
This is a like part of the world that we don't like to talk about as a society.
Yeah, sometimes you just get screwed over, yeah?
Yeah, there's just a lot of luck involved in these things. That's to take this episode, if Van Gelder hadn't been transferred to that facility, he wouldn't have, had this happen. And arguably, it's way more the fault of the institution for not recognizing someone like Dr. Adams was doing this stuff.
Our smart guy is up to no good. Maybe we should, notice this.
We get a lot of this, the smart guy is up to no good. But the flip side of this seems to be the smart guy can get away with anything. Because if they're given this much freedom to have these horrible abuses, it really suggests that no one's looking into them very closely.
Which is kind of a bad bit of planning, honestly. And I guess I kind of want to bring up sort of my experiences in the world of academia, as well as both being a someone who's taught classes as well as taken a good number of them. That the quote smart people are pretty much universally fallible. Some of them are just better at hiding it than others. And to automatically assumes like, oh yeah, this person's the celebrity, what's it, who's able to do all this amazing stuff and thus we should not be, scrutinizing them very closely is kind of a ridiculous notion. And the people that sort of treat the high end professionals, put them on this platter, are basically doing themselves a disservice and setting them up themselves and other people up to be abused by people that are just as flawed as they are.
Yeah, and I think that really just we've seen that demonstrated kind of over and over in this show so far, especially with how much they really, really get into the hero worship. Now, I guess you could argue that every time they do it, it's kind of seen to end badly for them. So I guess you're getting a little bit of counter messaging here. But the very fact that the culture exists where this kind of hero worshipping seems very commonplace suggests that you are letting a lot of these people get away with a lot of abuses. And we have seen in previous episodes that someone in power can get away with almost any kind of abuses.
I think, though, that's a problem that we still have in the modern day, actually.
Yes. It's depressing how apt that is. The only thing I see with this show is how much more it glorifies the idea.
Everyone becomes a fanboy, and then they become fools because of it.
Yes.
They become exploited. And then you suddenly have people rushing to the aid of billionaires. It's like, oh, you should not treat them badly because they're better than you? What?
Yeah, I think we've kind of hit a very logical through line from there's like one person who's just smarter and better at doing things and they're like super special and you should give them all this special treatment, to like if someone is successful it's just because they're flat out better than you are.
It's all been of ridiculousness here. Yeah, we could keep beating this dead horse, but
yeah, and I feel like we've strayed a little bit. We're also running a little long, so did we have any other points we definitely wanted to get to?
Well, I got my awards. I can probably run through those pretty quickly.
Awards!
Yes. So first up is Hard Drive Brain for being able to empty out a brain and rewrite it however you like. We got a Obvious Trap Award, for obvious reasons.
I feel like that one's going to come up a lot.
Yep. Got another new one. Read the Space Corps manual, Rimmer, for Kirk telling the transporter tech that he should probably like read up on procedures for something he's doing right now.
Inept crew again.
Yep. And Fake Paradise Prison for everything is great here, honest. Oh no, everything's not.
I feel like another one we're going to hit again.
Yes. It's like, as I sort of go through these, like, maybe I should be aiming to have more of these awards be sort of focused on specific tropes that tend to come up that are just kind of like, what? Again?
No, I didn't really have any fun tidbits for this. I had my tiny little fan theory that I don't want to get too much into, but I feel like the entire episode makes a lot more sense if you assume that Kirk's brain and Noelle's brain got switched during transport.
I guess that does kind of make sense.
She takes over his fanboying. Doesn't it sound a lot more like Kirk to implant sexy time memories into someone?
That is true.
So I think the entire episode is really the transporters switched their brains when they beamed down.
So maybe I should add another one to my list. Transporters are magic. But it's only fan theory. It's not explicit in the episode, so I don't think I should be justified in doing that.
Yeah, we can't get our own personal theories awards. That down that way lies madness.
But sometimes, a little bit of madness can be fun, though.
Yes. Next week, we're going to be doing something a little special.
Yes, it's our 10-ish episode anniversary, sort of.
Yes. Well, we kind of had talked about we don't want to go through an entire series nonstop because that's going to be like even if we only do the first season, it's, 25 episodes, I think, in the first season. If we kept going after that, we wind up with like almost 100 episodes total, not even counting if we get into the movies after that. So we have to break it up a little bit. And I kind of figured, episode 10, not counting the prologue, because, that wasn't really, an episode. So we're hitting episode 10, and I figured that's probably a good time to shake things up a bit.
Yes. So we're going to take a break from Star Trek for a little bit.
Yes, we are going to watch our first movie next week.
Yes.
And I want to be clear on this. Thus far, I've been tried really, really hard to make sure that if you're not watching along, you can still follow things. I'm going to do my best next week, but this is a little bit of an odd movie. So I would really recommend, if you haven't seen it, or if you haven't seen it in a while, you should go watch it. I know it's available on Amazon, so if you have the Amazon Prime, I think it's available free, and you can rent it there. I'm sure you can find it online if you want to.
We're not endorsing piracy, just so you know.
No, but there's plenty of places to rent it legitimately as well nowadays.
Yes. So you should be able to find it somewhere, guys.
This is actually one of my all-time favorite sci-fi movies. It is called The Man from Earth.
Like us.
Yeah. It's just The Man from Earth. It's I always get into like how much do you know about this movie, but I've seen it 4 times, so and I'm gonna watch it again before next week's episode. But it's like my favorite kind of really old school classic sci-fi. It is like 6 people in a room talking about an interesting concept, and that is the entire movie.
And this is actually a fairly recent movie, correct?
Yeah, it's fairly recent. I should have looked up the actors. It's got the actor who played Dr. Phlox in it from Enterprise. There's a couple of actors that I know and can't remember the names of right now, so I'll have to look that up for next week. But yeah, it has recognizable actors. They've been talking about making a sequel that might come out somewhat soon. I'm not sure if they got that completely in the works or not. But yeah, it's a fairly recent movie.
Is it going to be the Man from the Moon?
I don't know if it's The Man from Earth. I think it's just called The Man from Earth 2, which is boring.
Yeah.
But yeah, even though it's newer, it really, really feels like a kind of classic, hard sci-fi in kind of the old book sense, where it's just a bunch of people talking about an interesting thing. There's not really action scenes or like adventure stuff. It's just, here's an interesting concept, here are all of the potential ramifications for that and how it would affect people's lives.
Indeed. It's a movie about thoughts, ideas, exploring them.
Yeah, and without saying too much more to spoil things, like, it has a very interesting core concept in kind of how little fantastical things really matter in the grand scheme of things. So I just love that. So go try to check out Man from Earth. If you can watch it before next week, I would really, really recommend it, especially if you've never seen it. As I said, it's one of my favorite sci-fi movies just ever.
I've seen parts of it, but I'm looking forward to giving it a full viewing either tonight or tomorrow, and hopefully I'll be well prepared for next week's episode.
Yes. So join us then for Man from Earth.
Yes. Check it out in the meantime. Next time on Watchers of Tomorrow, we endeavor to commit identity fraud in order to avoid uncomfortable questions about Jesus. You have been listening to Watchers of Tomorrow, a podcast on science fiction media. Find and follow Watchers of Tomorrow on Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Spreader, Digital Podcast, and perhaps many more to come. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure to subscribe for more. And where possible, make sure to rate your experience or leave us a review. You may find Gepwin on youtube.com/Gepwin and Twitter @Gepwin. You may find me, Dr. Isix, on youtube.com/Dr. Isix and Twitter @IsixLP. Music is Waveform and Maury's Principle, both by DRKRN. You can also check out the Watchers of Tomorrow Discord channel. Make sure to share the experience with your friends, family, enemies, and alien overlords. If you feel you are suffering from transporter syndrome, please be aware that the next time you step off the transporter, that you, that is now, no longer exists.